Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles and I am your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of deep South Texas. Got a packed program for you today. As we reported yesterday, the Supreme Court heard arguments over the Trump administration's push to end legal protections for Haitians and Syrians as migrants fleeing war and natural disaster. They were among those from 17 countries with temporary protected status, which allows migrants already here in the United States to stay with work permits in 18-month increments, so long as the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security deems their country of origin unsafe for return. Well, a little later in the program, our South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez is going to speak with anthropology professor and director of the Center for Inter-American and Border Studies at the University of Texas, El Paso, Professor Josiah Heyman, about the impact that ruling could have on 1.3 million people currently here in the United States. So stay tuned for that. But first, let's take a look at what's trending across the border, starting with some developing news out of Washington. Now, according to our partners at The Hill, the House passed a bill a short while ago to fund the bulk of the Department of Homeland Security, minus Border Patrol and minus Immigration and Customs Enforcement. That is a major step toward ending that record-breaking 10-week shutdown for that department. Now, the bill passed by voice vote less than an hour after Republican leaders sent out a notice that the chamber would consider the legislation. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson had sat on that bill for a few weeks, but came under increasing pressure to pass it from the White House, the Senate, and Republican rank and file as funds to pay DHS staff started dwindling. Now, the bill passed the Senate last month and now goes to the president's desk for his signature. We'll keep you posted, obviously, on the developments on borderreport.com. In other news, the governor of Sinaloa and 9 other current and former Mexican officials were charged with drug trafficking and weapons offenses in a U.S. indictment unsealed Wednesday in New York. Among those indicted is the governor of Mexico's state of Sinaloa, Ruben Rocha Moya. The charges were announced in a news release by federal officials. None of the defendants are in custody. Those charged in court papers unsealed in Manhattan federal court are current and former government or law enforcement officials in Sinaloa. Authorities said they have played essential roles in helping the Sinaloa drug cartel ship fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine from Mexico into the United States. The U.S. attorney called the Sinaloa cartel a ruthless criminal organization that has flooded the community with dangerous drugs for decades. He added, as the indictment lays bare, the Sinaloa cartel and other drug trafficking organizations like it would not operate as freely or successfully without corrupt politicians and law enforcement officials on their payroll. Wait times at international bridges in Brownsville, Texas are back on track after delays caused some travelers to wait hours to cross from Mexico into the United States. Cameron County Judge Eddie Trevino Jr., who is the lead administrator for the southernmost county in Texas, said last week his office received reports that people were waiting 4 to 5 hours to cross from Matamoros in Tamaulipas to Brownsville. Trevino says he reached out to other ports of entry, just not here in the valley, but across the entire southern border, and Brownsville seemed to be the only port experiencing the issue. Trevino said he put in an official request to U.S. Customs and Border Protection requesting they look into their wait times, and shortly after, wait times did return to normal. Trevino says the cause of those delays was a directive for increased vehicle inspections, but the reason behind that directive is still what's unclear. He says it was not necessarily a security issue, but it may have been CBP was actually testing new equipment. Beyond the inconvenience to those who travel between Matamoros and Brownsville, Trevino said delays like this can affect the economy, especially when it comes to commercial vehicles.
Those guys and gals have got to get to where they're getting as soon as possible so that their product or parts or inventory, whatever it is that they're delivering, gets there so that it doesn't delay the fabrication of whatever plant that they're going to, their production of whatever product that they're working on. So these delays of several hours can have a very negative impact.
We reached out to CBP about the reason behind those delays. They didn't provide an explanation, but in a statement, they said, in part, all traffic applying for entry to the U.S. is subject to inspection, and CBP is utilizing all available technology to the fullest. They also encourage travelers who require tourist permits to apply for them electronically and for travelers to check border wait times online. The first direct commercial flight between the United States and Venezuela is scheduled to land in Caracas, the Venezuelan capital. Thursday's flight comes 7 years after the U.S. Department of Homeland Security suspended flights, citing safety concerns. The flight is expected to depart Miami in the morning and arrive 3 hours later in Caracas, returning to Florida later in the afternoon. The resumption follows the U.S. reopening its embassy in Caracas and restoring full diplomatic relations. In January, U.S. President Donald Trump announced plans to open airspace over Venezuela. American Airlines was the last U.S. airline flying to Venezuela before suspending flights in 2019. Getting now into the topic of the day, the Supreme Court has heard arguments in a case about the Trump administration's push to end legal protections for migrants fleeing war and natural disaster. The case, heard on Wednesday, offers the latest test of how the justices will assess the legality of the president's far-reaching immigration crackdown. The government is appealing lower court orders that blocked the Department of Homeland Security from immediately ending temporary protected status for people from Haiti and Syria. The court has cited and allowed the end of the program for people from Venezuela as lawsuits continue to play out. In Springfield, Ohio, nearly 12,000 Haitian migrants that have moved to the area over the last decade. TPS was originally granted to Haitian nationals after an earthquake in 2010, and conditions have progressively worsened over the years, leading to the TPS expiration being extended. The legal team defending Haitian TPS has said they've done so because the Trump administration hasn't properly assessed current conditions in Haiti, and that forcing Haitians to return would put their safety and lives at risk.
It doesn't matter whether you have fled because there was an earthquake or because there was an armed conflict. At the end of the day, people deserve to live in dignity and safety.
We do it for ourselves. We do it for the community. We do it for all the TPS holders, because some of the things that you do in life, most of the time it has to be an act of unselfishness, just to make sure that you show up for yourself.
And that brings us to our guest for today's program. I'll let our South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez go ahead and introduce it.
Thanks, Rudy. We have Professor Josiah Heyman, anthropology professor, director of the Center for Inter-American and Border Studies, also an endowed professor of border trade issues, University of Texas, El Paso, here on West Texas border. Welcome, Dr. Heyman, to Border Report Live.
Thank you for having me.
So you saw there in that introductory story about, temporary protected status being argued before the Supreme Court. We're talking 1.3 million people that could be affected by this, including 350,000 Haitians, 6,000 Syrians. I mean, what would happen if TPS was ended for all people? What are the long-term ramifications of this?
Well, one of the things that happens, TPS enables people to start a new life in the United States, and that includes their work, the contribution they make to the society, their churches, their children, their participation in education, so forth. And all of that comes to an end. I mean, that's yanking millions of people out of the things that they've been doing. Really, the case of the Haitians is interesting because there is lots of evidence that they're still fleeing an extremely dangerous and chaotic situation, a country with no effective government and extensive gang rule. And they're coming to the United States, and the ones we're getting in the United States are very consistently educated, productive, positive members of the community. And so it's quite an extraordinary question. Should we be giving temporary status to people who are under extreme threat and who are real contributors to American society?
In the case of the Haitians, they also had severe weather events, earthquakes. I mean, not just the political instability of the island nation. But the government's argument is that temporary protected status should be just that, the word temporary. And for some of these people, they've been here decades, and they're saying that's not right. What do you say as an educator to that argument?
I mean, this is a complicated question, because somebody once said correctly that no temporary immigration is temporary. But on the other hand, the conditions in Haiti have really not changed. So this is a very peculiar circumstance where the Department of Homeland Security is moving to terminate the Haitian access and Syrian access to temporary protected status, even though conditions are still very, very bad for them, as opposed to some of the other cases that have been argued. Well, why is this, shouldn't it be temporary? But temporary could be 20 years if a country's government is collapsed and you have widespread epidemic illness and you have rule by gangs with guns.
And already TPS has been revoked for 348,000 Venezuelans, right? And about 500,000 Haitians, 200,000 Salvadorians. I mean, how has this affected those people? Has there been recidivism? Have they tried to recross the border? I mean, what have we seen since that has happened?
Yeah, that's an important question. I don't think most of the people who get temporary protected status and then lose it try to recross the border. I think those are different movements of people, but I'm not sure we totally know what will happen. I think in the case of the Haitians, we know that they have been going to other countries in Latin America and have actually had positive experiences. For example, in Mexico, which is not an easy country to be in if you're not Mexican. It's a difficult country sometimes to be Mexican. And so I think in this immediate case, I don't expect this to lead to sort of a further surge in migration at the border, which people here and listening to Border Report might be thinking about.
We're speaking with UTEP professor Josiah Heyman. He's also the director of the Center for Inter-American and Border Studies at University of Texas, El Paso. We're going to continue the conversation after a quick break, so stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. Time now to jump back into our conversation with University of Texas El Paso professor and director for the Center for Inter-American and Border Studies, Professor Josiah Heyman.
Professor, we were talking about temporary protected status, and just to kind of go over what it is with some of the viewers, this is granted to people from 17 countries, or has been granted in the past. It allows them to work. They get work permits and protection from deportation. Some of the reasons are the countries are at war, there are natural disasters, as we mentioned, earthquakes, hurricanes, they're unsafe places, coups, unstable political environments, like you mentioned. But there's also some rules. They can only be granted TPS if they've been continually present in the United States since a certain designated date that the government has established, and they have to keep registering with the government. And so they cannot come after this certain date. So just those kind of what the rules are for applying for TPS. Now, Forward.us says that TPS contributors add $29 billion annually to the United States economy, and then they pay nearly $8 billion in federal, state, local taxes. You mentioned the economic impacts that could happen. Can you expand upon that if we have no more TPS? What will this do to the economy?
Yeah, it's that you heard those figures, and I think they're realistic. I mean, the classic case was from the campaign year of 2024 when President Trump and other people were attacking Haitians in Springfield, Ohio. But there's very good evidence that the Haitians actually had led to an economic revival of a declining community, and especially because they were filling jobs there, jobs that were had led to an expansion in manufacturing. So I think that we have that, and we have there's a need for immigration in the American economy. We have a aging population. We know that. We have a lot of roles in a lot of different slots in the economy that goes all the way from heart surgeons to people putting shingles on the roof. And those things need to be filled in. And we're, in our economy, it's not just a matter of battling each other for jobs. We support each other with jobs. We're kind of part of a whole big network of people who enable things to get done. And I think that as the country gets older and older, we're going to discover that we're going to need a continued immigration workforce. And I would just add to that one of the things people, I think, don't think about, but is very, very important, is that the typical immigrant to the United States, through whatever laws and through whatever routes, is a young adult. And young adults are the healthiest and most productive people in society. We want to live in a society where we're supported by working age adults. Now, and I think that's very important.
You've been talking about the money. Let's talk about the societal strains that this could cause. I mean, again, there are nearly 400,000 U.S.-born children to people with TPS. What could happen if that is rescinded? Will these families be broken apart? Will the children leave? What's going to do? I
mean, one of the dilemmas that we're facing now, and this is even more profoundly at stake in another Supreme Court case, which is the birthright citizenship case, is what do we do with children? We're in a situation where we know what rights children have. And there's a whole series of questions. Are we going to continue to, for example, allow children into public schools? Are we going to challenge an important Texas and then U.S. Supreme Court decision, Plyler v. Doe, that gives access to K-12 education for children of all statuses? Can we afford to have a society where children don't have any education and don't have anything to do? I mean, if we do want to encourage gangs, that's the way to do it. And so, I think that what are we going to do with children is a really it's a moral question, and it's a purely practical economic question, all wrapped up in one.
Speaking of youth, let's talk about the DACA recipients. And the Trump administration is also moving to deport DACA recipients and end that program. Once again, they had to apply, reapply, pay their fees, adhere to a number of regulations and rules. But yet here in South Texas, there was a young man from Honduras, a 30-year-old man, who was deported, and he apparently was brought back yesterday. And now it looks like he may be held again right now in South Texas, rearrested. I mean, what is the impacts, the future impacts to our country if DACA is rescinded as well?
And we'll find out more about that story, but honestly, that's shocking. That is really shocking. The thing about the current administration is that they're really trying to tear down legal immigration, right? So the selling line is we shouldn't have illegals. We don't want illegals. Particularly, we don't want criminals. Well, but they're going after people who are not criminals. Okay, they're going after illegals. Well, they're going after legal immigrants also. DACA is a legal status. People who are in that status, as long as they don't violate that, are legal immigrants. It's actually becoming hard to get processed legal immigration visas. Everybody says, well, why don't they do it the right way? It's turned out to be difficult in the Trump administration to, quote, do it the right way, unquote. A lot of money, people who have immigrated a relative or an employee know that a lot of money gets put into Citizenship and Immigration Services for processing fees, for document fees. It's a fee-based process. The public doesn't pay for it. The immigrants pay for it. And that is what's happening is people are paying a lot of money into the legal immigration system, and they're not getting their documents processed. And that's also shocking.
You know, that kind of had a question pop in my mind, what you were just talking about, both the illegal and the legal immigration process here. You know, what happens with these millions of people that could be impacted by this Supreme Court decision when it comes to, you know, deportation? Is it just they just get added to the list of targets for DHS on looking for them, or is there like some kind of leeway on, you know, an X amount, a grace period, if you will, to, you know, find a way home?
Well, there won't be a grace period. They will be told that they can go home, and maybe allegedly some of them are supposed to be getting money to go home to pay the costs, although that actually hasn't really been happening. But the truth is that what we're going to get is a country with a lot of people who are unaccountable. There's no track record of them. They're not really known. They're going to be living in the shadows. We already have that with people who are unauthorized. Now we're going to have millions more who are turned into shadow figures. And I think that's absolutely the wrong thing to do if you think about it from the point of view of Homeland Security. You want to know who everybody is. If you think about it from the point of view of a healthy society, you want to know who everybody is, and you want them to be able to get access to, like, let's say, medicine, vaccinations. And so, you know, this is I'm actually quite concerned about the emergence of a shadow society on the outer margins of the country. People tend to be very law-abiding. Immigrants are more law-abiding. I'm sorry to say it, but they are more law-abiding than U.S. citizens. I'm afraid we're going to create, you know, a group of people living in the shadows who are maybe not so accountable.
Well, certainly the numbers show how much that they do pay taxes, federal, state, and local, contrary to what some people believe.
Your sales, is this Texas, your sales tax is coming from immigrants of all statuses.
Also, recently, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals just this week heard a case about immigrants and are ruling, you know, the case was a lawsuit against the fact that they're going to be held without the chance to challenge or without bonds. That could also potentially bring many more people into the detention process, the removal process, right?
Yeah, one of the disturbing things that's happening now is that chipping away at fundamental constitutional rights, one of which is bond and another one of which is a warrant for raids on private dwellings. And both of those are being chipped away at on the grounds and we're going after administrative violators who are immigration status violators. But, you know, first they come for the immigrants, then they come for everybody's rights.
We've been speaking with a University of Texas El Paso professor of anthropology and director for the Center for Inter-American and Border Studies, Professor Josiah Heyman, about a whole host of issues, including the main topic at hand, the potential ending of TPS for millions here in the United States. We're unfortunately out of time, Professor. Hopefully we can call on you in the future, but thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 2 minutes. Live, Rudy Mireles here in Harlingen, Texas. Got one last fun story to share with you that impacts the border. And BTS, the global K-pop superstars, are taking over El Paso, Texas. The band is making its first appearance in West Texas as part of their 2026 World Tour. The group returned to touring after being off the road for years as band members completed South Korea's mandatory military service for young men. If you're watching and you're trying to get tickets out of El Paso, we know we have a lot of you watching from there. Unfortunately, BTS sold out both shows at Sun Bowl Stadium for both Saturday and Sunday. So maybe they'll be back around along the U.S.-Mexico border sometime in the near future. Just wanted to remind you that you can always stay informed on the story shaping the U.S.-Mexico border while on your commute home, out for a jog, or maybe you are getting your grocery shopping done for the week as we bring you real-time updates and expert insights from both sides of the border in podcast form. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and YouTube. That's going to do it for us today. For Sandra Sanchez right here in South Texas, my name is Rudy Mireles. We'll see you next time.